Watt is a very unique partner in Paper Mario. She has only one attack, but it ignores any and all defense outside of Bowser's Star Rod. What will be the end result of this run? Let's find out. While in the prologue, we do not have access to action commands, meaning we are condemned to only do 1 damage per turn to any enemy we fight, which is the case for Red and Blue Goomba. Because I hate leaving stuff up to luck, I grind up to 20 max HP, and then I managed to win this without any real issues. A bit of a slow start for this Lil Sparky, but from this point forward the run should be a lot more smooth. Exhibit A, Goomboss. Wait, Goomba? No. Goomba King. So this is interesting. Watt's Electro Dash cannot target the tree at all. I mean, it makes sense, the tree is attached to the ground after all. Not to mention, wood doesn't conduct electricity very well anyway. But still, this means that Watt has to take her sweet time knocking out both the red Goomba and the blue Goomba one after the other, with absolutely no help from the environment. And after that old mess, well, it's all down to Goomboss to finish us off, but he can't do that, because by now we have like 20 HP max. Yeah, just roll with it, I'm in a Super Mario 64 DS mood right now. Not too much later, we also have access to our action commands thanks to Lucky Star, and let me be straight with you all. From now up to like Chapter 4, Watt just goes on an absolute terror. Let's start from the beginning. In Chapter 1, there are 4 fights before the Koopa Bros fight. Now Watt deals only 3 damage per attack, which is just enough to 1-hit KO any fuzzies we find. Moving on up though, we then have to fight against some Koopa Troopas and some Bob-ombs. Despite the fact that Watt's Electro Dash does not do very much damage, it also ignores any and all defense. So enemies like Koopa Troopas don't take 2 damage from this attack, they take 3. This is handy for sure, but I also learned some very interesting things to do with electric attacks in this game. For example, for some reason, whether or not Electro Dash is fatal against the Bob-omb, it will always detonate it after 1 hit. That is a quirk I don't understand at all why it's programmed to be this way, considering the fact that Bob-ombs only appear in Chapter 1. And I cannot begin to fathom why you'd bring Watt in here after you finish here, because there's not really anything left to get. But, whatever I guess. So far so good though, right? Well, it gets even better. Now we have to build blasters shortly before we fight the Koopa Bros themselves. Once again, Watt just barely falls short of one-shotting any of them. But to her credit, she can do it, so I won't complain. But this then leads us to the Koopa Bros fight, and quite possibly the greatest example of Watt's sheer level of dominance. Being fair to Trojan Bowser, if you use Electro Dash against it, it takes 3 damage. And after just 4 Electro Dashes, the Trojan Bowser is destroyed. This part of the fight is just whatever. Now for other partners in this series, I actually get a Thunderbolt to use specifically to topple this tower down in 1 shot. This is the only way the majority of partners actually have a chance of closing the fight out, and at least getting credit for Trojan Bowser. The thing about Watt though, is that just her Electro Dash is enough to topple the tower down in 1 hit. This is a very big deal, because this fact alone means that Watt can defeat the Koopa Bros all by herself. Special thanks to JDAster64 for telling me about this. If I had to hazard a guess as far as why Electro Dash works the way it does here, it's because it's considered an electric attack, a property that Electro Dash shares with the Thunderbolt item. This is especially important because Watt can only do 3 damage per hit, so the Koopa Bros will get back up on their feet, and they will stack back up again. But no, Watt's able to just take her time here, and she's sure enough able to win this fight without any issues at all. A very surprising but welcome development for this challenge. And it goes without saying that Junior Troopa was no trouble whatsoever either. Literally his only gimmick for this fight is that he has defense. Yeah, he really has absolutely nothing on this. Running through Chapter 2, Watt shows no signs of slowing down. We do skip Buzzar, but only for a few minutes. I really want to rank up Watt right now. 1 extra attack point won't really matter for very much, but it is extra damage, so why the heck pass it up? And shortly after this, we go to fight Buzzar, and Watt just bullies her, like, wow. So, this is something I was not expecting to see in this challenge, but Watt can actually do Buzzar damageless. She has a status move called Power Shock, which can actually paralyze an enemy for a couple of turns if it's successful. And for the whole fight, Buzzar was literally helpless. She was constantly being paralyzed, while Watt would just chip away at her HP slowly but surely. If I had to sum that fight up in 1 word, humiliating. And Watt also did very well in Chapter 2's Drive Ruins. Despite the spikes on Pokemummies, Watt doesn't get hurt using Electro Dash on them. And she's also literally floating, so swoops will not be out of her range either. And since she ignores any and all defense, obviously the Stone Chomps would not be any trouble for her whatsoever. This just leaves Tootin' Koopa, a boss which is not going to be any trouble for most partners anyway. It was decently long on account of the fact that Watt only does 4 damage per turn, but survivability is not a problem, especially thanks to damage dodge. And so after 8 turns, we're able to clear this boss and proceed onwards. This leads us to the magical world of Chapter 3, where we can now buy as many live streams as we want. And of course, you know we gotta fight Junior Troopa in the forest as well. He's flying now. It doesn't really matter very much except from having higher attack power, but he is flying now. His 1 defense point still does not matter though, because Watt's Electro Dash of course ignores defense. It took a fair bit of time, but we got plenty of that. Another one bites the dust. And speaking of dust, as we hack our way through the Gusty Gulch and back out, we gotta scrap with the heart of Tubba Blubba. My first instinct was to use Power Shock, try to restart the heart a bit. But unfortunately this heart seems to be pretty freaking resistant to electricity. So screw it, time for Plan Z. Zap, zap, zap. I mean, yeah, the heart itself does a lot of damage to Mario, but I can't really help that now, can't I? Besides, it's 3 turns I use another life shroom, and Watt does 4 damage per turn. So at the most, I'm losing what, 3, 4 life shrooms? That's not a big deal when you have a whopping 10 life shrooms in your bag. Meanwhile, Tubba Blubba saw Watt bully him harder than the boos typically do. It turns out the Power Shock is rather effective here, so yeah, sayonara. Watt's potent, man, I'm telling ya. This power ship has been pretty fun, but it's in Chapter 4 where it finally stops. First thing it did though was zap this blooper to Calamari, and then I grinded some star pieces. There just aren't very many partner badges I could take advantage of, so I just used Peekaboo instead. After all, Goombario is the only partner that can tattle, and I'm not using him in this run right now. I am aware that the anti-guy exists, but I'm not studying him right now. No, let's address the elephant in the room. Big Lantern Ghost. He has Watt trapped in his lantern. Knowing this, Watt obviously cannot fight the Big Lantern Ghost. That being said, I'm using a practice file, so heck if I care what this game really thinks. But seriously, you may have noticed that this room is entirely pitch black. That much is clear as day. Yes, that was a pun, laugh at it. But did you notice the fact that Watt is currently out and about fighting? As it turns out, Watt's natural ability to illuminate any room that she's in does not take effect in the fight with the Big Lantern Ghost. Just like every other partner, she still has to attack the lantern twice before being able to see the Big Lantern Ghost. That makes no freaking sense. But moreover, this is the first fight that is impossible for Watt to beat all by herself. Because by the time that Watt hits the lantern 2 times, the Big Lantern Ghost will blow it out immediately. As a result, she has 0 opportunity to do any damage at all here. I'm sorry to say it, but the answer to the question if it is possible to beat Paper Mario 64 with only Watt, the answer is no. And the sad thing is that it's entirely her fault. I guess Watt's just too dim-witted. But still, the point of this video is not to see if a partner can beat the game all by themselves, but how much of the game can they beat all by themselves? That being said, for Watt, she can do quite a bit by herself, huh? Anyway, next up is General Guy, which is a fight I was honestly expecting to be going very well. And yeah, it delivered on my expectations, quite modestly in fact. Shy Squad as always is no issue because of the Fem Plus. The Stilt guys and Shy Stack did pretty heavy damage to me, but they didn't last for too long. And once again, I have plenty of live shrooms, so suspense is at an all-time low. And then there's General Guy himself. Now, under normal conditions, I would probably just focus on the light bulb first and then General Guy. With Watt, I'm not going to do that. This is because A, the fight is not very long. Watt ignores General Guy's tank's defense, so the 2 defense it has is counted as 0. And since the tank has only 30 HP, it's not a very long fight, like I said before. And B, Watt can't be paralyzed by the light bulb anyway. She's actually impervious to electricity, so there's really no reason to rush. I mean, yeah, on occasion Mario will take more damage, but if my partner's not in any real danger, then what do I freaking care? Again, I got plenty of life shrooms. 4 chapters down, and still half the whole game to go. And the next fight we have to do that is required is a very tricky one for every other partner but Watt. And by tricky, I mean impossible. Fuzzapee can only be encountered with Watt active in your party. And moreover, she has to let the room be bright enough to see the Fuzzapede too. In battle though, Watt has absolutely no problems actually attacking the Fuzzapede. As a matter of fact, she can power shock the thing and then just chip away at it until it falls. If you couldn't already tell, this is the one and only fight in the entire game that only Watt can beat. Kind of unfair to the other 7, but what can you do? Who's that partner? To compensate, Watt has a slightly harder time than most other partners in Chapter 5. Of course, while rescuing the Yoshi kids in the Jade Jungle, both the Future Piranhas and the Ambushes are no trouble at all. Deep in the Jade Jungle, however, we have to fight 3 Future Piranhas and the White Magic Koopa. Now Watt is not very strong. Her most powerful attack does only 4 damage. Meanwhile, the white magic Koopa can restore 5 HP upon healing itself. This could be really bad for Watt, if not for the fact that she knows the move Power Shock. With this move, she's able to paralyze the white magic Koopa and then take her time defeating him. Yeah, this might be the first time that paralyzing an enemy is actually necessary. But sure enough, it does pay off here. Now we have the Ultra Sword in our possession, which means we can now learn the move Mega Shock. This may be a bit of a hard... Ow, I bit my tongue. Mega Shock is basically Power Shock, but hits everybody on screen, not just one enemy. It's really just kinda there, but I wouldn't say it's very necessary for any fights in particular. Definitely not Genius Troopa in any case. He may be airborne, he may have a spike, but Watt doesn't care about either of those two things. Now Electro Dash does 5 damage every time it hits, and all we really need are 4 turns to win. Since we can, let's fight Electro Blooper too. The fact that this boss can electrify himself means nothing here at all. Watt is a being of pure electricity, so just keep using Electro Dash, and eventually the Electro Blooper will go down. Hey, quick question. Isn't electricity considered to be hot? Because if so, then it's really a shame that Watt can't hurt Lava Piranha during Phase 2. I mean, yeah, Phase 1 is pretty easy. As a matter of fact, you can even paralyze Lava Piranha. Not just in Phase 1 either, but Phase 2 is even easier there. Fun fact, even if a boss is resistant to a status element, it becomes easier to cast that status element when you have other enemies in the battle that are weak to it, at least unless there's any enemies that are actually immune. That aside, when Lava Piranha is on fire, Watt can't hurt him. A real shame that's the case too. She can hurt spiky enemies, but not fiery enemies. But hey, I guess Watt can't do them all. Almost every fight in this chapter is possible for Watt. The multi-moles are a cakewalk. They're a slow bunch to beat with only Watt, but they're still possible all the same. Though it does make me wish that Watt had more than just one attack. My next target was the Super Blooper. Not required, but it is possible and it is a boss, so I'm fighting it. The fight for the most part was just standard stuff, attacking until it goes down. But then the Super Blooper spawned some Blooper babies, and from there, Watt took a page out of my Disabled Mario Alone challenge and completely crippled this boss. Now, against only Super Blooper, paralysis will not come easy for us. But when she has 2 spawned Blooper babies and you try to use Mega Shock, it is super effective here. Mega Shock becomes practically guaranteed to paralyze every enemy on screen if this happens. And save for any, unfortunate bloopers, the Super Blooper will never get to attack me again. Shoot! As I said before, never attack me again because you're defeated now. Anyways, after that was taken care of, Watt has no issue fighting any of the required enemies after the fact. This includes both required fights with Lakitus, by the way. Despite the spikes on the spiny shell, they are not immune to being hit by Electro Dash. And in return, Watt OKOs these pests. Meanwhile, giving enemies an electric charge isn't really much of a defense against the being of pure electricity like Watt. Lackluster was also no issue, though it is fair to mention that this fight took 10 turns to win. But this right here would be a good day. Let me show you what a bad day is like. Huff and Puff is the boss of Chapter 6, and wouldn't you know it, this cloudy fellow is entirely immune to Electro Dash, Watt's one and only attack. Yep, that's the second boss in a row that Watt cannot even hurt. Except here, it's even worse, because this is for the entire fight, where Lava Piranha at the very least can be attacked on the first phase. That's a pretty heavy hit for her if I may say so myself. So like that, Chapter 6 was kind of a bust. Before starting Chapter 7 however, there's a few fights to look at. First up is the anti-guy though. Now, any partner that does at least 5 damage per turn can win this fight no problem. Mostly thanks to having 10 life streams at the beginning of the fight. Though interestingly enough, Watt's Power Shock is actually super effective here, so honestly go nuts. But this fight is Smallsville. I'm really focused on Chapter 8's anti-guy unit instead. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Right now, let's focus on the dojo. Predictably, Watt has no issues with any fights up to Master 3. Though Lee was a bit awkward considering the fact that she can't hurt other Lil Sparkies. I mean, I'd complain with the fact that Watt's only attack won't work here, but Lee does transform back into being a Duplicos in a couple of turns anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And there are a few fights earlier in this challenge that were beneficial to have that immunity anyway, so I'm gonna say, okay, you can't have the good without the bad. Now, Master 3 was not that bad. I mean, I did have to block pretty much every time after I used a live stream up to make sure I would actually survive, since Watt does 5 damage per turn thanks to the fact that she pierces defense. And that rounds up to 20 distinct Electro Dashes against Master 3 to win. But you really only have to worry about blocking right after you use a live stream up. And that's only if Master uses the double attack, and I'm sorry it's the third time. You have to block only one of those 2 hits. Manage that and you're golden. And this little Miss Einstein is bright enough to get her diploma. It's Miss Mouse! What do she and Watt have in common? She also does an excellent job against Kenshi Koopa. It's funny, this guy has 6 defense, and Watt, she doesn't even care. Turn by turn, she's doing 5 damage per hit. And if she wants to, she can also paralyze Kenshi. It's not super reliable, but it is an option she has. Yeah, the damage Mario's getting hit by can be pretty dang heavy, but all the same, very good performance. Which seems to be the theme for Chapter 7 actually. After a bit where Watt gets to play defense attorney for me, Junior Troopa is here and at it again. About all I could really say is that it takes 10 Electro Dashes to win, and we had plenty of turns to do it. Between my defenses and live shrooms, the risk was just extremely low. Like, we're at the point where we can reduce as much as 8 damage in 1 hit to a flat 0. People like to boast about, say, partners with really strong FP attacks like, say, Bombette and Mega Bomb are the way to go, but you just become this immovable object after Chapter 5. It makes me wonder, maybe in the future for these videos, I should ban danger patches like, say, Last Stand. The next fight of note is Monstar. Despite the appearance, this is very much the easiest boss in the game. 20 HP, only 1 attack power, and defense doesn't really matter. 4 turns is all it takes to win, bringing us then to the Crystal Palace. And the fights against required enemies here really aren't anything special. To start with the Magic Koopas and the White Clubbas, literally everything here can be paralyzed by using Mega Shock. In the case of White Clubbas, they stay paralyzed for 4 whole turns too. Plenty of time to pick them all off one by one. The Duplicos, however, are an interesting thing to look over. There are a few required fights in here, but I only want to focus on the Duplicos in Chapter 8, because in that chapter, you fight 4 Duplicos all at once. In Chapter 7, the most you're ever required to fight come in groups of 2. However, failing to divine the true either Bombette or Kooper when the Duplicos try to confuse you, can have you fight as many as 4 all at once. Which generally means you have to spend a whole turn switching out on your partner's turn to Watt, which gives the Duplicos the chance to transform into Watt. Interestingly enough, Duplicos when they transform into Watt can actually still be paralyzed by Mega Shock. However, they in turn become immune to Electro Dash. This technically means that Watt can't beat this fight guaranteed. Still, we can't quite count out Watt yet. Even during the time before entering the Crystal Palace where Kooper and the Duplicos get mixed together, it's important to remember that the badge quick change exists. So if we really needed to, we can win. Though I will hold off on giving Watt her points until Chapter 8. Bringing us now to the Crystal King. Yeah, I've been talking so much about Duplicos for the past few minutes, I forgot this chapter actually had a boss. His 2 defense means absolutely nothing to Watt. Every turn she does 5 damage all the same, and at this point in the challenge, it's about as good as using either Parakarry, Sushi, or Bombette's 1 FP attacks as well with Flower Sabers. What really sells Watt's performance here though, are whenever the Crystal King uses illusions. Now, this could very easily become a guessing game trying to predict which Crystal King is the real one. But this is actually where Mega Shock becomes very helpful. Instead of risking a miss, I can actually potentially paralyze the Crystal King for a couple of turns. And even if I don't, I know who to target. So unless you feel really brave and that you're going to get the right one just from using a single Electro Dash, you had nothing to lose to try Mega Shock here. After all, you had nothing else to use your FP on. Yeah, the damage would be pretty heavy, but we have plenty of life shrooms and we have Last Stand, so no real risk of death here either. Chapter 7's boss is down and out. And since there's nothing really standing between us and Chapter 8 right now, let's begin the final chapter, how about that? Now the first few fights, it does kinda hurt Watt that she doesn't have a move that hits multiple targets all at once. At least one that does damage. Mega Shock still does pretty well for her. And sure enough, against the 3 Koopa Trolls and the 1 Magic Koopa, it's great. Turns out it's actually guaranteed to work here. And so all 4 of these enemies suffer a slow but very painful death by electrocution. And funny enough, similar stuff can be said for the Anti-Guy unit as well. Now, unlike in Shy Guy's Toy Box, these Anti-Guys are not weak to being hit by shock. It's still fairly effective here, but not super effective. So it's not necessarily guaranteed to work, but it is still fairly useful. And yeah, I'm not able to fill the entire meter the whole way through and guarantee literally everyone's paralyzed. But I don't think that's necessary, because oftentimes I paralyze 2 if not all 3 of the Anti-Guys. And for how many that are paralyzed, it drastically reduces how much damage Mario is taking on a turn-by-turn basis. Yeah, this fight was slow, but very much possible for Watt. It looks like she really came out to play. Though for Watt, there is one more fight we have to look at, because just before Junior Troopa number 6, we have to fight the Koopa Ghosts, and there's at least 4 we have to fight all at once. This is what I was talking about just back in Chapter 7. And turns out, yeah, Mega Shock works perfectly fine here. Granted, Mega Shock gets really exhausting when you have to button mash multiple times, but, you know, in theory, you can't max out the meter. And in practice, that's exactly what I'm doing for this fight. So basically, just keep using Mega Shock, don't let them have a chance to transform into Watt, and congratulations, she finally gets her credit for this enemy. But will she get maximum credit for the fight with Junior Troopa? I honestly highly doubt it. Watt has no issue actually doing damage to Junior Troopa in this fight, which is true for both the first and the second phase, but by the third phase, it really puts her attack power on trial. To Watt's credit, she does have an easier time with this than other partners do because of her ability to use Power Shock, but even that's not the most reliable move we can use here. It's fairly effective, but that's literally all I can say for it, so unfortunately for her, I can only give her half credit for this fight with Junior Troopa. But you know, he's the small fry. The big grandmaster of all things bad himself, though, Bowser, is an entirely different beast. For this video, let's focus on Bowser in the hallway. So to start, there is nothing really up. It's all fine and good, like you'd expect. Watt's Electro Dash does 5 damage to Bowser up until he uses the Star Shield on himself. And under Star Shield, not only does Bowser's attack power get souped up a ton, like half of his attacks dot double damage now, but his defense goes up by a whopping 4. Now, for most partners, that's kinda just par for the course, but Watt wouldn't really care about that, right? After all, her basic attack and her only attack ignores defense. But that doesn't really apply here. Bowser's Star Shield grants Bowser an impossible to pierce defense stat. So instead of doing 5 damage every time she attacks, Watt's only doing 1 damage. And keep in mind, Mario is not allowed to use Star Beam here to disable that Star Shield. If I allow that, we'd have what happened with Lady Bow, where my partners can bully Bowser like he's absolutely nothing, and it wouldn't even be fair. And clearly, the alternative where a full-grown man bullies a little baby is better, right? But that's life for you when you're an animal. You learn from birth, or you die. And Watt, she was out like a light in this fight. Do you have any idea just how long Mario would have to hold out to survive 40 whole turns when you have only 10 item slots max, and Bowser can just delete an entire life shroom in a single turn using his Fire Breath? And keep in mind, Watt doesn't even need the FP that she has. So I took off my Flower Savers and instead equipped some HP pluses. But not only that, I also equipped Fire Shield, and as you can see, the Fire Breath, when Bowser has Star Shield up, still does exactly 10 damage to Mario. He cannot survive that no matter what unless he's in danger, and he has at least 4 or even 5 HP left. Couple that with a tendency for human error, because obviously I'm not going to be able to block literally every time I get hit by the Star Wave, since if you block too early then Mario guards instead, your partner's out of commission for 3 whole turns. What I'm driving at is that it's in theory possible to win this fight with only Watt, but not at all realistic. And by not realistic, you'll see what I mean when we get to Lackluster. So yeah, Watt was flying high for most of this challenge, but then she kinda crashed at the end. Still, she did pretty well all things considered for this run, which just makes the question, how'd she do overall? Assuming my math is correct, Watt's ending score is 28 points. Funny enough, that score is actually equal to Parakarry's. However, for the sake of the ranking, I'm giving the advantage to Watt. Both Parakarry and Watt have 5 perfect chapters, but Watt barely wins out because she has a perfect Toad Town. Regular chapters give you an additional tiebreaker point, but Toad Town gives you +2. In case you're wondering, that's what the sound effects were for. The is for +1, and the is for +2. Bravo, Watt, bravo. Your score was simply stupendous, and one that partners in general will have a very hard time trying to beat. As a matter of fact, the next partner in this series will be Kooper. Thank you to Dumbopan, Kyle, Joel, and Swirl for playing along. Cause when you throw Kooper out there, he comes right back at ya. And now, try to guess the next partner in this series. As always, here's your hint. In my Luigi-only solo run video, they're the only partner to not physically appear throughout it. Have fun. And until next time, thank you for watching. Bruce.